Hello everyone, I'm Kelly and I'm from the Brown class of 2027. Today I'm excited and grateful to have the opportunity to interview Attorney Geng. Our discussion will focus on women's rights and the importance of promoting sex education. Now, I would like to extend a warm welcome and invite Attorney Geng to introduce himself to all of us.
Okay, I'd like to give you a brief introduction to myself. I work as a lawyer at Junhee Law Firm Shanghai branch.
I am very pleased to have invited Mr. Geng, and I am also very honored to have this opportunity. In fact, with the recent popularity of legal dramas about sexual assault cases, such as Imperfect Victims, people are beginning to pay more attention to the role of the law in protecting women's rights. Therefore, I would like to ask Mr. Geng to share some of the basics or highlights of the laws on the protection of women's rights and interests, whether in China, Japan, or any other country you would like to talk about.
Let me start then with a broader perspective. Many of you may have noticed that women are being mentioned more and more frequently as victims, both in terms of problems in the job market and in criminal cases. There is also a great deal of media coverage of this. Therefore, I would like to discuss this issue first from the legal level of a country. In fact, in China, there are clear legal provisions for the protection of women. It may seem to many people that the protection of women's rights and interests in daily life is not sufficient, but from a legal point of view, China has established a series of legal systems aimed at protecting women's rights and interests. In China, there's a law called the Law of the People's Republic of China on the protection of rights and interests of women, established in 1992 to safeguard women's rights. Last year, in 2022, the law was revised and enhanced by the National People's Congress to strengthen this protection, reflecting increasing awareness and societal progress. The Law of the People's Republic of China on the protection of rights and interests of women has been amended by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress and has become a very new law. This law makes provisions in a number of areas, covering women's personal rights, their right to education, their right to work, their rights and interests in family and marriage, and so on. This is the first thing I would like to introduce to you. In fact, for the protection of women's rights and interests in China, there exists such a law similar to the law of the Consul General, that is, the Law of the People's Republic of China on the protection of rights and interests of women. This law establishes some principal provisions for women in China in respect of their personal rights, property rights, family and marriage, education, labor and social security, and so on. These provisions clearly state that women should enjoy the same opportunities and rights as men and be free from any form of infringement. This is a broad framework that I would like to share with you first of all.
We are currently paying special attention to the issue of gender equality in the workplace and to the focus of today's discussion, sexual assault of women. If possible, please elaborate on some of the specific legal provisions, information that may be helpful to us in the general public.
With regard to the issue of sexual assault, including the recent incidents of sexual assault and indecent assault frequently mentioned in the country involving some well-known entertainers and other heavy news, our criminal law has clear provisions on this. First of all, rape is a crime that is strictly prohibited and penalized under our criminal law. The provisions of our criminal law on the crime of rape have a specific gender orientation, i.e., only acts of sexual intercourse using coercion or threats against a woman constitute the crime of rape. This is clearly stipulated in the relevant articles of our criminal law, indicating the law's specific position on the protection of women. Therefore, our definition of the crime of rape places special emphasis on the victim being a woman, which may differ from the relevant legal provisions in Japan or other countries. In law school, we discussed at length the constituent elements of the crime of rape, and these discussions were based on a consensus that the crime is constituted by the unilateral pressure exerted by a man or by the act of performing a sexual act against the woman's will. Under China's current social environment and the considerations of legislators, the focus of the crime of rape is primarily on the protection of women. Therefore, if a man is sexually assaulted, we cannot directly use the crime of rape to convict him of a crime. There is also the crime of forced indecent assault in Chinese law, which also includes men in its scope of protection. With the latest amendments, Chinese law has expanded the protection of the crime of forced indecent assault from being limited to women and children to include all persons, i.e., to include men. This change addresses the issue of gender inequality in legal protection and ensures that men are also protected by the law when they are sexually assaulted. In addition, the crime of rape in Chinese law still refers specifically to situations in which women are victimized, demonstrating the specificity and limitations of the scope of legal protection. With regard to the question of whether the definition of the crime of sexual assault will be amended in the future to read the crime of non-consent to sexual intercourse, as is the case in Japan, so as to make both men and women objects of protection under the law, there is at present a discrepancy in China's legislation in this regard. It remains to be seen whether this discrepancy will be remedied in the future through changes or amendments to the law. Additionally, Chapter 5 of the Law on the Protection of Women's Rights and Interests which is devoted to labor and social security rights and interests, explicitly stipulates that it is improper for an employer to ask a job applicant personal questions about his or her birth plan, marital status, or family situation during the recruitment process. It is a violation of the law on the protection of rights and interests of women for employers to ask discriminatory questions or use personal circumstances such as gender, maternity, or marital status as a criterion for hiring. The law aims to eliminate such discrimination and protect the legitimate rights and interests of job seekers, especially female job seekers. Everyone should take care to safeguard their legal rights during the job application process. Although I work primarily as a lawyer in the field of foreign-related business transactions and have not directly dealt with victim representation or suspect defense in sexual assault cases, I can share a few observations based on general experience. Taking a rape case as an example, most female victims will be in a state of extreme panic and fear after a sexual assault, which is a common reaction. Female victims often do not know how to protect themselves after a sexual assault. In such cases, it is vital to remain calm, even though it may be difficult or even cruel for the person concerned. This is because in the process of filing and investigating criminal offenses such as rape cases, clear thinking and timely action are critical to initiating legal proceedings and protecting the rights of the victim. Report the case to public security authorities, the starting point for legal proceedings. The first step after a sexual assault is to report it to the public security authorities immediately. While waiting for the police to arrive, preserving the crime scene and evidence is a crucial step. Many women may choose not to publicize the matter or report it to the police for various reasons, but this is extremely detrimental to the subsequent legal defense of their rights. Therefore, it is very important to use legal means to protect oneself, i.e., to report to the police. It is critical to remain calm and preserve the crime scene while waiting for the police to arrive. Avoid going to the hospital on your own to check for injuries that could destroy possible evidence. In sexual assault cases, preservation of the crime scene is critical to the police investigation. Traveling to the hospital on one's own may destroy evidence, especially for STD testing or injury assessment. In rape cases, the victim may have external and internal injuries such as scratches, signs of struggle, which can prove that the victim was subjected to coercion and are important to the investigation of the case. Internal injuries, evidence of bodily fluids, and hair left behind after a sexual act are critical to the investigation. Evidence retained by the body, e.g. body fluids, hair, needs to be professionally collected under the guidance of the police by the victim being taken to a designated hospital or forensic institution. Not reporting a crime to the police due to safety concerns or fear of retaliation hampers the protection of the victim's rights and interests, so it should be avoided. A crucial point is to avoid contacting the culprit privately following the occurrence under any circumstances. Not reporting to the police enables the suspect to exploit the situation by alleging an ulterior transaction or questioning the victim's behavior, thus denying that rape occurred. To ensure their rights are protected, victims of rape should gather their courage to safeguard themselves and the crime scene, promptly reporting the incident to the police.
Thanks for sharing practical advice. However, in reality, many people are not clear about the line between sexual harassment and assault and normal contact between men and women. Often, it is only when other victims come forward that some people realize they have actually been sexually assaulted. It is therefore important to ask whether there is a legally clear definition of sexual assault to help people recognize the boundaries in their daily lives so that such incidents can be prevented.
The law imposes penalties corresponding to the seriousness of the violation, from the less serious to the more serious. The most serious cases, such as the actual occurrence of a sexual act that violates sexual freedom, are regarded as serious violations and may be subject to criminal law sanctions such as rape or intentional injury. Relatively minor offenses such as intentional indecent assault and forcible indecent assault are defined more broadly, including whether they occur in a public place, whether they involve physical contact, or whether they are merely verbal acts. Specific cases require in-depth analysis based on the actual form of the act and the relevant legal provisions. In daily life, the most common is probably sexual harassment. The law on women's rights shields against sexual harassment by condemning any form of physical, verbal, or other communication or behavior that causes discomfort, distress, or displeasure. Within companies, especially in Chinese and Japanese companies that comply with regulations, there are clear internal rules that establish criteria and preventive measures for the prevention of sexual harassment, especially for the protection of female employees. In Japanese society, large companies have long established a clear system of in-company employment. Most of our clients are Japanese companies, and we often receive complaints about in-company sexual harassment and compliance investigations. Some female employees may be subjected to unbridled sexual harassment, and whether such behavior constitutes an assault on them by the company or an individual needs to be assessed on a case-by-case basis.
For the victim or survivor, the appeal process can be an emotional burden and may even lead to secondary victimization. It is crucial to maintain psychological balance while advocating for their rights. I recommend that they seek mental health support and work with support groups or professionals for emotional support and guidance. They may also consider developing a self-care program, including exercising, maintaining a healthy lifestyle, and finding a support network to cope with stress and anxiety.
In China's civil procedure law, applications for in-camera hearings are indeed permitted in cases involving personal privacy or state secrets, for example. This practice is designed to protect the privacy and sensitive information of the parties concerned and to ensure the fairness and legality of the trial process. So the first thing is that he will try to isolate the client from the public eye because he is not a case that has to be heard in public. Under Chinese law, under certain circumstances, victims may choose not to testify in court, but to provide evidence to the court through written testimony or other means. This arrangement is intended to reduce the psychological burden on victims and to protect their privacy. Victims have the right to choose not to be confronted with the suspect, so it can reduce their psychological pressure and discomfort. For the victim, facing the court process may be a secondary victimization. Therefore, she may choose not to participate in the trial, but to provide evidence to the court by giving written testimony or other means. Until then, she needs to try to cooperate with the police, the prosecutor's office, and the medical institutions by providing relevant evidence to support the charges. In this process, the attorney representing the victim and the medical side of the examining hospital and other relevant persons need to ensure full cooperation in order to ensure the sufficiency and reliability of the evidence. Their role is to support the victim and provide the necessary legal and medical support to ensure the smooth running of the case and a just verdict. During court hearings, victims can choose not to participate, but they can still defend their legitimate rights and interests through their representative lawyers and other relevant persons. In addition, an increasing number of rape cases in China involve minors.
In this year's law reform, the handling of sexual assault cases against minors has been given more attention and improved.
In May of this year, China's Supreme People's Procuratorate and Supreme People's Court issued an approval to strengthen the crackdown on sexual assault cases against minors. China's Supreme People's Procuratorate, SPP, and Supreme People's Court, SPC, issued an opinion paper on strengthening the fight against criminal cases of sexual abuse of minors by partners. This legislative document guides the handling of minors' sexual abuse cases by a partner, setting clear procedures and standards. Victims are usually not required to testify in court in criminal cases involving minors. If a minor victim is required to appear before the court will take appropriate protective measures to ensure his or her safety and privacy. That said, with regards to his instrument, it is crucial that he prioritizes both the protection of the privacy and the preservation of the mental well-being of the individual involved throughout the trial. Nevertheless, it is a universal principle for him to refrain from appearing in court for cases involving the sexual abuse of minors. Ensuring that the person concerned is protected from secondary victimization during the court proceedings is an important manifestation of the gradual humanization of the legal system.
It is very important that you share this information because for many victims, one of the biggest concerns is protecting themselves, including making a reasonable claim for protection in the legal process. They worry about the possibility of being victimized twice or feeling that they are losing face and feeling embarrassed. It is indeed very humane to have such a system in place, and it can encourage more victims to come forward and seek help in the legal process. This is particularly important in the international student community. International students may encounter similar situations abroad. However, legal procedures abroad may differ from their home country, and processes such as taking evidence may differ.
Although Chinese legal procedures may not be directly applicable to cases occurring abroad, under certain circumstances, cases occurring abroad may still be admissible in China for foreign nationals holding Chinese nationality. However, the specific applicable procedures may need to take into account local law, international law, and the relevant provisions of bilateral agreements.
In the case of international students who have been victimized abroad, they may be concerned about whether it is more appropriate to handle the case abroad or at home. This depends on the specific circumstances, including the legal system, the ease of obtaining evidence, language and cultural differences, and other factors. International students who have been victimized abroad often choose to report their case to their school or local police, but this can take a long time, even more than a year. In such cases, they may consider handling the case in their home country. However, whether the case can be handled in home country depends on the nature of the case and the relevant provisions of their home country and local laws, and some cases may still need to be handled abroad.
For crimes of aggression, evidence is crucial. Determining whether a person has committed a crime involves relying on evidence to determine whether he has committed a criminal act that meets the definition of the law. In legal cases, both the defense and the plaintiff are involved in the issue of evidence. As an example, the Edo case in Japan, involving the murder of a Chinese student in Japan by her best friend's ex-boyfriend, was a highly publicized case. Ultimately, all evidence, including the testimonies of the perpetrator and the victim, as well as the physical evidence at the scene, was taken by the Japanese police. The case is complicated by the fact that it involves a personal feud between Zhang and Liu Xin, as well as a lawsuit between Zhang mother and Liu Xin over his domestic reputation. However, all crime scene evidence is crucial. The most accurate collection of information in the chain of evidence preservation should be carried out by the police in the place where it took place, be it the Japanese or Chinese police, in order to ensure the authenticity and completeness of the evidence. Then in the future, after the initiation of judicial protection and litigation, strategic issues like cross-border evidence transfer and lawyer cooperation become crucial for case progress. Nevertheless, at the evidence collection and preservation stage, it is preferable for local judiciary to secure evidence promptly. This aids in reconstructing the crime scene and protecting the legitimate rights of all parties involved.
Thank you so much for sharing so much useful advice with me. As an international student, there have been many similar incidents recently, and I believe that interviews like this can help many people and allow more victims to find confidence and protection so that they can come forward without being victimized twice. Thank you again for taking the time to conduct this interview with me. I am now ending the recording.